Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 3, Drunk in Wild Songs. Chapter 250, Defensive Battle. 3/4 past the hour of Zhou, gloomy clouds concealed the moon. The Bianchi cavalry withdrew from the front lines after they regrouped, replaced by the elite forces from the first attack. The torches they raised suddenly went out, and the drums that had been sounding all night stopped. The outskirts of Duan province were abruptly plunged into darkness. Without the illumination of the torches, the archers along the city wall could not see across the trench clearly. The sentry climbed up the only remaining watchtower and bravely stepped on the railing, where he craned his neck to survey from high above the ground. "Can't get a clear look." The sentry's temples dripped with sweat as he gestured to the top of the wall. "Too dark." The onslaught of attacks from the single-branch cannon and catapults ceased, too. Other than a scattering of sound from hooves, no other news could be gathered from within the city. In this rare moment of silence, the garrison troops trod lightly, as if afraid of startling something. They stood up in their respective positions, with some premonition of the rainstorm that was about to come assaulting them. The garrison troops in the passageway began to withdraw outward, dragging the corpses they had cleared out to make way for the imperial cavalry. Clear water splashed over the green slab stones and flushed past the hooves of the horses, dissipating the strong, heavy stench of blood. The ranks of the Bianchi cavalry moved. They planned to pass through the passage planks they had securely erected, then form a wall before the city gate. They had figured out the ways of the imperial cavalry after numerous attempts at feeling them out. To deal with the steel needle, they had to form a thick brick to smash it to pieces. The garrison troops stationed at the top of the city wall did not dare to wipe their sweat. Their juts in their throat bobbed as they listened to the sound of hooves and silently counted down in unison in their hearts. The Bianchi cavalry dashed towards the trench. The hooves of the Bianchi cavalry's ponies stepped onto the passage planks, and the thunderous sound instantaneously resounded through the trench. "Now!" The garrison troops waved their banners and shouted in a hoarse voice, "Shove!" The heavy rocks at the top of the city wall started rolling along the small wooden passages, rumbling as they turned past a few small and short areas, where they bumped against the edges and went springing out to rain upon the trench. The Bianchi cavalry, who had been hidden in the darkness, could not block the sudden assault from above, and they were knocked off stride by the smashing rocks. More than half of the passage planks immediately broke apart, and countless Bianchi cavalrymen plunged into the trench. The city gate was already wide open. With Shen Zequan in the center and Xiao Tianya and Fei Sheng as the flanks, the three squads charged in unison. The Bianchi cavalry's formation that had fallen to pieces left countless voids, and the imperial cavalry attacked where they saw openings, tearing the Bianchi cavalry's attacking squads into pieces starting from the trench. Archers replaced the rock pushers at the top of the city wall. Hot oil was poured over the arrowheads, which were wrapped in tattered rags. The arrows were then fired down at the same time they were ignited. The Bianchi cavalry did not have the cover of the infantry's head guard, nor did they have the protection of armors, so the moment the flaming arrows brushed past their clothing, they would start burning. All at once, the entire trench lit up. Fei Sheng's right flank had already charged across the trench through the Bianchi's passage planks. He bent half of his body over in the strong gale and lashed out with his horsewhip to speed ahead. As he passed by Yin Chang's position, he suddenly slid over to pull out the old man's blade with one arm. The instant he grabbed hold of the hilt of Yin Chang's blade, he turned his head aside to wipe his cheek hard on his shoulder and thrust the blade into the vacated sheath on his back. In the wind, Fei Sheng pulled the reins to turn the horse aside and continued to gallop towards the smoke signal tower in the southeast. The Bianchi cavalry sensed a branch of light cavalry breaking out of the encirclement in the dimness. Before the cavalrymen they mobilized could close up the opening, Shen Zequan, who had similarly crossed the trench, clutched them by the throat and forcibly dragged them over. The center and left flank of the imperial cavalry were all meant to act as a shield and cover. With their backs to the burning trench, they spared no effort to fight at close quarters under the rain of arrows. The scattered Bianchi cavalry speedily regrouped themselves, but the speed of the imperial cavalry was swift too. None of them held an advantage over the other on their mounts, it all hinged on whose blades were faster. Qiao Tianya's original appearance was barely discernible under the splatter of blood. He wiped his blade with his sleeve and whistled as he followed Shen Zequin. "Your lordship." Qiao Tianya was done wiping his blade. "Is this blade still good to use?" In the darkness of the night, where bursts of sparks erupted all over, Shen Zequin said, "Just as fast as Yang Shan Shui." Qiao Tianya's tattered sleeves exposed his arm. He had not even put on his arm guard. He was just like a blade without a sheath. All of a sudden, he turned around and said in a way which no one could tell if he was being serious, "Don't say it like that to Yuan Zhou. It would become a big misunderstanding. I'm not fast." "Then I'm really." Shen Zequin suddenly held up Yang Shan Shui that he had been grasping in a reverse grip at an angle to block the scimitar behind for Qiao Tianya. Blood splashed all over Qiao Tianya's face under the slashing sound of a blade. Calmly, Shen Zequin continued, "So very happy for Yuan Zhou." The imperial cavalry in the back returned to their position, and Shen Zequin ceased to speak. With Yang Shan Shui in tow, he turned the horse around to face the direction of the Bianchi cavalry's single-branch cannon, then broke into a run. The man in charge of passing on military intelligence sped through the ranks while waving a small flag. Pointing at the single-branch cannon, he said, "Withdraw the cannon." But the imperial cavalry was too fast. The scorpion guarding by the side of the single-branch cannon swung his hammer at Shen Zequin. Just as Shen Zequin, who was regaining his grip on Yang Shan Shui, was about to cross swords with the scorpion, he suddenly rolled off his horse, and Feng Ta Shuangyi instantly lifted its hooves to sidestep away. The scorpion's intention to break Feng Ta Shuangyi's legs with a swing of his hammer fell short, and as he turned around, he cursed in the Bianchi tongue, "Cunning." Shen Zequin kicked out at the ground and leaped forth in a pounce. The scorpion was strapping tall and sturdy, and Shen Zequin climbed onto the back of the scorpion's shoulders and used a hand to suddenly crank the head of the scorpion askew to expose his neck. As the blade met flesh, Yang Shan Shui slashed across it. His right hand lacked strength, and he unexpectedly missed, failing to slit the scorpion's throat. Blood spurted out from the scorpion's neck. The hammer he was brandishing did not stop. He let loose a ragged gasp that did not sound human and grabbed hold of Shen Zequin with his free hand. A drop of blood on the ridge of Shen Zequin's brow trickled down. He resisted the force, and that blade that had once slashed across the scorpion's neck made another attempt. As if he was slaughtering cattle and sheep, he used a sawing motion to completely sever the other man's throat. This relentlessness to persist until the other man's death sent a chill down the backs of the imperial cavalry behind him. The scorpion toppled over to the ground with a crash. His hammer and Shen Zequin both went falling. Feng Ta Shuangyi had already circled back. Shen Zequin climbed to his feet and mounted his horse once again. With the tip of his toe, Qiao Tianya lifted the hammer and weighed it in his hand, then swung it down hard on one of the legs of the single-branch cannon stand. The leg of the stand promptly splintered and broke, and the entire single-branch cannon tilted over to the side. The sound of wood splitting erupted in their ears. Fire instantly started to burn. Fei Shen was holding a torch. The right flank had already charged their way close to the smoke signal tower. Exhaling puffs of air as he dismounted, he stumbled and used the other arm to grab to the edge of the steps and scrambled up the tower with both hands and legs. The Bianchi cavalry, who were in pursuit of them, shouted as they came attacking. Once again, the imperial cavalry crossed swords with them at the foot of the tower. Fei Sheng sprinted along the steps, and when he reached the tower where smoke was to be lit, he tossed the torch in. The dry tower pit burst into flames. He took 2 steps back and said, "It's done." Following that, the garrison troops on top of the city wall cried out loud and shouted below, "It's lit." Feng Ta Shuangyi retreated, and Shen Zequin said, "Withdraw." The flames at the smoke signal tower blazed. Just a few more moments, and the smoke signal towers to the east would all start lighting up in successive order. Fei Sheng held his hand to his chest, wanting to wipe his eyes. But unexpectedly, the sudden wind sent the ashes fluttering all over. The sky that had been overcast for half a night began to act up, with a few drops of rain serving as a forewarning. Before the cheers in Duan province could even get going, the torrential rain came pouring down like cold water all over Fei Sheng's face. It was raining. The flames of the smoke signal tower were just like delicate flowers swaying in the rainstorm, their heads bowed low from the pounding of the water droplets. Gradually, the fire became smaller. Fei Sheng lunged to the front of the tower. Blocking out the rain with his hands, he raged. Bloody heaven! No doubt Duan province was bound to usher in a bout of rainstorm after several days of clear skies. This rain poured down in torrents, which meant that the trench at the east gate would not lack water for the time being, but it would be tough to light up the smoke signal tower again. Come on, light up. Fuck your ancestors. Fei Sheng struck the flint. However, this rain that had come out of the blue was pouring too hard, and his hands were both soaking wet. He could not light it up anymore. This was a sudden rainstorm that came without warning, but it stopped fast, too. As long as they could temporarily retreat back to the city, they would still have the opportunity. Shen Zequan steeled himself and brandished his blade towards the southeast. Withdraw. Fei Sheng's vision blurred. He thought it was because of the heavy rain. He frantically struck at the flint and watched as the spark spluttered. Old man. Fei Sheng's fingernails that he had badly scraped while clawing at the gate were blood-stained. His hands trembled as he raked out the hay that had yet to be extinguished in the tower pit. It's too hard to be a hero. Fei Sheng widened his reddened eyes and pulled out the book he had used for information gathering from his bosom and stuffed it into the pit. He leaned over and blew with his mouth, the smoke choking him to the point that he almost suffocated. In all my life. Fei Sheng blew on the small fire to let the tongue of the flame lick the book. The fire suddenly flared and almost singed Fei Sheng's hair. He fell to the ground and spat. This is the only time I've ever sacrificed myself for others. The twice-lit smoke signal tower did not blaze high in this downpour, but it was enough. Following the one tiny spark in the southeast that shone faintly, countless flames lit up in succession. They spread abruptly along the smoke signal towers into the shape of a long, snaking dragon that flickered in the heavy rain. Fei Sheng took a few steps to the front of the tower and prepared to jump down. The voice he wanted to shout out stalled in his throat, and he stepped back again. The flood of the Bianchi cavalry before the smoke signal tower was so overwhelming that there was no opening to be found at all. The right flank of the Imperial cavalry was just as slender as an awn of wheat in this sort of large, retracting squad. Fei Sheng was drenched through. He looked over his Xiaochun blade that was already chipped from all the hacking and said to the rain, I told you a long time ago that a hero doesn't come to a good end. The rain pounded on Fei Sheng, the cacophony of noises sounding like it was engaging in a war of words with him. The blood on Fei Sheng's face had been washed away. He tossed away his Xiaochun blade. Stepping on the edge of the smoke signal tower, he abruptly pulled out Yin Chang's blade. Towards Duan province, he shouted, Your lordship. His chest heaved. Erect a stone tablet for me. Engrave loyal and courageous, Lao Fei X. I want to face the Hashi River with the old man and stand guard over Duan province for you for 10,000 years. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Shen Zequan spurred his horse on. Rainwater splashed across his facial features. Duan province. Zongbo. He was no longer the frigid wind coursing through the territories. There were countless figures behind him. That heavy weight lay upon his shoulders, pinning down a Shen Zequan who once drifted in the world back onto the ground. As he stepped onto this expanse of land, he couldn't. The prefectural lord lifted his head high under the torrential rain and roared, Break out of the encirclement. Fei Sheng leaped off the smoke signal tower, rolled to the ground, and flipped over to his feet. Wielding his blade, he hacked off the front knees of the ponies and barged his way in along with the muddy water. The Bianchi cavalry swarmed over like a colony of ants, breaking up the right flank with its charge. The glint of Yangshan Shui broke through the rain. Hooves trampled over corpses to break out of the encirclement from the southeast direction. Fei Sheng held his blade up against a scimitar and was pushed backward. At the critical juncture, he heard an explosion through the torrential rain. He abruptly fell back into the mud and rolled once. He was beside himself with joy as he wiped his face. Reinforcements. The sound of explosions on the south end of Duan province erupted once again. Following close on the Bianchi cavalry's heels, Huo Lingyuan relied on the firearms of this imperial cavalry squad to blast out a path for themselves. Exerting himself, he loaded the firearm and blasted away as he charged his way through the ranks of the Bianchi cavalry, all without wiping the rainwater off himself. Behind him, Tantai, who could no longer hold himself back. As he drew out his blade, he shouted, "Motherfucking Bianchi Baldies! Your granddaddy who is here!" The vanguard squad of the Dun province garrison troops that had set off in advance was here. Asterisk. Thick clouds enveloped the canopy of heaven. When the rain stopped, the city gate was once again tightly shut. Shenzhequan gasped for breath. His fingers were already all white from the soaking. When he dismounted from his horse, the water in his boots gushed out, and his boots made squishy sounds as he stepped across the ground. "Remove your blades and take a break." The imperial cavalrymen all dismounted one after another and stuffed themselves with food that the garrison troops delivered. They replaced blades that were bent and went to the shacks at the foot of the city to rest. Time was precious. They did not even have time to change their clothing. Instead, they just wrapped a thin blanket around themselves and took several sips of hot tea before leaning against the wall to sleep. Tantai, who took off his helmet and followed Shenzhequan up the city wall. Huo Lingyuan followed closely behind him and reported, "I headed north along the Hashi River and midway through, I found that the Luosha relay station had been massacred. I originally wanted to return to Duan province to report to your lordship, but there were too many of the Bianchi cavalry, so I headed west and lit up Dun province's smoke signal tower." Shenzhequan's drenched hair plastered against his cheeks. "How is the situation in the battle zone?" "The bridleway has been cut off," Tantai Hu said. "Looking at it from the current situation, it's not easy going for the battle zone either." The few of them reached the top of the city wall and sat on the ground behind the intact battlements. A rudimentary shed had been erected here, so it was still rather dry. Shenzhequan spread open the military map and in passing, took off the agate on his right ear that was so dirty it resembled a bead of mud and put it under the clothing on his bosom. He looked at the map for a moment and said, "It's raining and the entrances are all muddy. The Bianchi cavalry's military supplies are going to sink and get bogged down in the mud. They will not attack rashly before the sun rears its head. But they will not stop for too long, either." Qiao Tianya pointed at Dun province. "They already know that the reinforcements from Dun province are coming. The garrison troops are all infantry. They are slow on their feet. It will still take another night for the majority of the troops to rush over to Duan province." Tantai Hu touched the scar on his eye. "My advance squad only has 2,000 men." Fei Sheng was almost lying down. He hugged Yin Chang's blade in his arms. He no longer had any strength left to wail, and his voice had gone all hoarse. "The smoke signal tower in the southeast has been lit. We only need to defend until the night passes. The Bianchi cavalry is fast." Huo Lingyuan interrupted Fei Sheng. "If Hassan wants to intercept and stop Dun province's reinforcement, he can still make it in time if he mobilizes troops south. We can't gamble time on this night." Hassan's advantage lay precisely in his understanding of Zhongbo's terrains. The Dun province garrison troops were not the imperial cavalry. They had to run on two legs. They only had to be obstructed by the Bianchi cavalry, and they would very likely stall behind Duan province and delay the reinforcements. We have to hold until reinforcements from the Bianjun commandery arrive. Huo Lingyun traced his finger along the bridle path from the Bianjun commandery to Duan province. Second master said it before when he headed down south. As long as Hassan moves, Commander-in-Chief Qi will circle back to Gidal to launch a sneak attack from behind Hassan. No matter what, Hassan can't stay in Duan province's territory for long. The city walls of Duan province are solid, and there is no lack of food. At the very least, we can defend for another 2 days. Defend for another 2 days. The hearts of everyone present sank at these words. Qiao Tianya turned his head and looked out of the battlements. A battle to the death, huh? Haze shrouded the firmament. The Hashi River, which could still be considered magnificent last night, was now reduced to a deathly white tattered cotton. After being scoured by the rain, the city walls would darken. The garrison troops continued to clean up the battlefield at the city gate. It did not matter which side the soldiers had been on. As long as they had become corpses, they would all be stacked together. The faces of those people were similarly deathly pale as they lay in the mire, like lush grass that had dried up from lack of water. Shenzekwan walked down the stairs alone and headed over to the side of the water vat to wash his face. He braced himself with one arm and looked at his own right hand. He dipped his hand into the clear water, and the blood stains on the handkerchief promptly blossomed in the water. Aye's handkerchief is now dirty. Shenzekwan undid the handkerchief. Both of his fingers were swollen from the tight binding. He turned and sat down, then wrung the blue handkerchief dry and set it out to dry on his knees. He tilted back his head, fixing his gaze at the top. The wind caressed the tree beside him, strewing the ground all around with fallen leaves. And Shenzekwan, leaning against the water vat, fell asleep. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Hassan scooped up the river water with his hands. While facing east, he buried his face in it and said his farewell. The heads by his feet had been strung together. His scimitar was stained red with fresh blood, and his newly cut leather clothing revealed both of his wrists. Hidden away in the pocket of his sleeves was the flower of Chidi that Duo Erlin had given him. The aged wise one cupped the river water in his hands and raised them to pour the water over Hassan's head. May the gods bless and protect the heroic eagle of the Hanshi tribe. Hassan lifted his dripping wet face and looked at the wise one as he asked, "Will I win?" The wise one leaned over and stroked Hassan's forehead, his cloudy eyes bearing the weight of the river. He seemed to be even older than the Hashi River was. His wisdom was not one that Bayan could match. He kneeled, cupped Hassan's cheeks and answered slowly, "You are already standing in a place we have not gone before." "There's still a wolf ahead standing guard," Hassan said. "I killed his father. The king of wolves killed your brothers and sisters." The wise one's aging face was just like the barren sand dunes in the desert. The compassion bestowed upon by the heavenly god of Chidi comes accompanied by pain. He took away the grasslands and the blue sky. We are already committed to fight to the bitter end where only one of us is left standing. Water droplets dripped from Hassan's chin. After a moment of silence, he said in a quiet voice, "I will win." Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Shenzekwan was startled awake by the sound of artillery bombardment. He felt cold all over the very instant he opened his eyes. Under the flurry of footsteps, he swiftly secured the handkerchief back on his hand and rose to his feet. "Light the fire." Torches around him lit up in a flash. Shenzekwan stepped up the stairs to the top of the city wall. There are still Biancha cavalrymen crossing the river. Fei Sheng looked out into the distance. They are gathering in the direction of Duan province. Shenzekwan drank up the ginger soup that Qiao Tianya handed him. "Hassan is here." The Biancha cavalry has split up into flanks. Cold sweat broke out on Fei Sheng's back. "This is bad. They're going to charge from 3 sides." The Biancha cavalry seemed like an eagle who was in the midst of spreading its wings open. The center came together to form a horde, their numbers far exceeded those in the daytime. Meanwhile, the two flanks of the Bianchi cavalry bearing torches and taking a detour dashed at lightning speed. "Notify the south and north gates." Shenzequan smashed the bowl and raised his voice. "Be on guard and defend to the death." Before the words were fully out of his mouth, half of the battlement near him collapsed with a bang. The imperial cavalry and garrison troops all broke into a run, while the archers hoisted up their bows on the battered battlement and drew their bows. Unlike the two flanks, Hassan's center squad did not move. He put all his catapults and single-branch cannons to use. Heavy rocks came hurtling over in torrents at the Duan province city wall, the impact so strong it sent debris of the wall flying all over. The archers could not keep a steady hand on their bows at all. The Bianchi cavalrymen beside Hassan erected their banners, and the cavalrymen in the rear all abandoned their drums. Instead, they held up their horns and blew them. The two flanks had already reached the north and south gates. The north gates released a batch of arrows, although the south gate could only hurl farming tools. The advisors in the riding stables were all taking a short break when they suddenly heard a resounding crash from the gate. The women and children present promptly broke out crying in alarm as they huddled together. "They are attacking the city." Gao Zhongxiang started trembling as he hugged his papers and brushes close to him. The battering ram did not succeed the first time, and not a moment later, an even heavier crash rang out. The outermost city gate broke apart at once, and the shouts of the Bianchi cavalry permeated through the overhanging gate. The commoners present were all in a panic now as they frantically jostled their way backward. A garrison troop soldier at the top of the city wall leaped down and drew his blade, shouting to the crowd, "Run for the alley." He had yet to finish his words when the battering ram slammed into the overhanging gate with a loud crash, sending forth a spray of wood splinters and creating a hole in it. The garrison troop soldier raised a hand, his sweat and tears flowing as he gasped violently for breath. At the very moment the battering ram sent the lower side of the overhanging door flying, he took the lead and broke into a run, brandishing his blade as he charged and shouted, "Slay the enemies." With Kong Ling pushing the wheelchair, the advisors followed behind the commoners as they flooded towards the residential areas. The garrison troops could not hold up against the Bianchi cavalry's assault. Scimitars scythed across the garrison troops' heads as though they were reaping harvest. The sounds of hooves never stopped at all as they charged right into the running crowd. The advisors had already dashed over to the entrance of the alley, choked full with commoners inside. A woman had to pull along several children in tow and carry an elder on her back. All the young and strong had already taken up their places before the overhanging gate, and all those who remained here were totally powerless to fight back in the face of the Bianchi cavalry. Gao Zongxiang's papers fell off along his arms. His legs were shaking, as was his body. Before he could squeeze his way in, a Bianchi cavalryman hooked the back of his collar and dragged his entire body over. Gao Zhongxiang yelled in terror, his tears and mucus flowing profusely. The Bianchi cavalryman said something and spat at Gao Zhongxiang. Gao Zhongxiang, at the end of his rope seeing no way out, summoned up a burst of strength out of nowhere and spat at the Bianchi cavalryman, too. He shouted, "A scholar would rather die than be humiliated." The Bianchi cavalryman fell off his horse with a thud. Swinging a bar of door blot that he had picked up at random, Kong Ling urged, "Quick, Shinwei, run." Covering the back of his head, the Bianchi cavalryman clambered to his feet and felt for his scimitar. Gao Zhongxiang had initially taken a few steps back. Seeing as Kong Ling was about to fall behind, he yanked over the cloth bundle under his arm, which still had brushes and an ink slab in it, without even thinking and slammed it right at the head of the Bianchi cavalryman, sending the cavalryman, who was caught off guard, back to the ground. Without throwing the bar away, Kong Ling lifted the hem of his robe and pushed Gao Zhongxiang into moving. Both of them then ran for the alley. Gao Zhongxiang was still turning his head, looking at his bundle as he cried and said, that ink slab of mine was really expensive." Qiao Tianya galloped past, leading a column of imperial cavalry head-on into the Bianchi cavalry. Both parties start battling and slaying each other in the darkness. The commoners in the alley covered their mouths, only daring to whimper and not wail as they listened to the violent sounds of fighting at close quarters. A constant stream of garrison troops ran past. Yao Wenyu turned his wheelchair, keeping close to the edge, but he could not hear any sound from Jiao Tianya. After an hour, torches suddenly lit up at the entrance of the alley. Wiping his chin that was dripping with blood, Jiao Tianya raised his head slightly at the interior. His gaze swept past Yao Wenyu to Kong Ling. "May I trouble Mr. Cheng Feng to lead everyone back to the residence?" Kong Ling repeatedly answered in the affirmative. Only then did he throw away the bar in his hands. He hurried forward and called out the commoners to follow. Gao Zhongxiang hurriedly bent down to pick up his papers. Amidst the weaving flames, Jiao Tianya moved aside a few steps and pressed in towards Yao Wenyu. Yao Wenyu said, "His lordship." The wheelchair bumped lightly against the wall. Yuan Zhou suddenly grabbed the armrest with a hand to brace himself as Jiao Tianya cupped his cheeks and walled him in this dark, gloomy corner for a kiss. This kiss was not at all gentle. It blazed with astounding desire under the taste of blood. Jiao Tianya abruptly let go of Yao Wenyu. He wiped down Yuan Zhuo's blood-stained chin for him and stepped back quickly, then got on his horse and left, leaving Yao Wenyu behind, covering his chin in shock. Asterisk. Hassan cracked his horsewhip. He led the elites to break across the trench and charge towards the east gate with mud in tow and the battering rams following behind him. Tan Taihu waved his arm and said, "Get ready." The mounted crossbow at the top of the city wall clicked into action. A dozen soldiers from the garrison troops propped up the long arrows. This mounted crossbow with exceptional destructive power could only be used to deal with Hassan, but it was difficult to find the opportune moment. They had to first make Hassan retreat. The water surface in the trench rippled. Hassan's horse had only just landed on the ground when a blade came at him head-on. He urgently held up his scimitar and blocked the blow. Through the flames and dust, he saw Shen Zequin. Neither man gained a lead over the other in their first confrontation. At the very instant they sidestepped each other, they obtained a measure of the other. Hassan's red hair inclined slightly as he spun his scimitar and pointed the blade at Shen Zequin, as if taking aim at him. He said with precision, "Shen Zequin." Shen Zequin lightly grazed past the blade. Feng Ta Shuangyi raised its hooves and stepped around Hassan, and Shen Zequin suddenly slashed off the head of the Bianchi cavalry, tagging along with Hassan. Hassan remembered Xiao Qiye. Xiao Qiye had sent Aqi's head back. This was a humiliation of sorts, reminiscent of how he too had taken away Xiao Fangxiu's head. Both sides were at the point of no return, and steel blades clashed several times. The Bianchi cavalry pushed the imperial cavalry back, and the imperial cavalry stubbornly pushed them back again. The hooves of their horses weaved among each other in the mud. Men kept plunging into the trench, turning into mire. The garrison troops at the top of the city wall shoved the remaining heavy rocks down, but an endless stream of replacements kept filling in for the cavalrymen who were knocked down. It was as if there was no end to it, no matter how many they killed. Shen Zequin was different from all the opponents Hassan had encountered. He still had his wits about him even in the face of such a critical assault. Perhaps he was not as strong as Hassan, but he was sufficiently cunning. All of Hassan's forceful attacks went smashing into the water. That was an elusive sense of powerlessness. This was a most thorny opponent. Hassan retracted his scimitar and drew out his piked dagger. Kerosene splashed all over at the top of the city wall, and it started burning all around. Hassan made the first move, blocking the trajectory of Yang Shanshue's diagonal slash. The battle steed suddenly charged forward, pressing up against Feng Ta Shuangyi as it rammed Shen Zequin back towards the city gate with brute force. Forward charge! Yang Shanshue nearly slipped off his hand. The hilt pressed against both Shen Zequin's fingers so hard that his fingers were almost contorted. Shen Zequin, however, did not feel it. He forcibly turned the hilt and used his remaining 3 fingers to grasp it in such a way that the back of the blade bumped against his forearm. Just like that one move of Yin Chang, he held up the blade with his elbow at the same time he turned around to slash it towards Hassan's throat. Hassan bent over to dodge the blow, and holding his pike dagger in a reverse grip, dealt out a strike at Shenzhequan's chest. With a lightning move of his hand, Shenzhequan caught hold of Hassan's wrist, but his strength was not enough, and in this blink of an eye between life and death, he abruptly pressed Hassan's pike dagger down so that Hassan's forward thrust only stabbed him at the side of his waist, avoiding the vital points. "Your lordship." Watching Hassan attack from the top of the city wall gave Tan Taihu such a fright that his soul nearly took leave of his body. Having stabbed Shenzhequan in the waist, Hassan attempted to retreat, only to realize that the fingers grabbing him were like steel nails. Shenzhequan's eyes were grim as he said, "Shove." The imperial cavalry that seemed to be in disarray behind him instantly reorganized and followed Shenzhequan to withdraw back to the center, where they then swarmed towards this one squad of Hassan. "We been had." Hassan pulled out his pike dagger. The imperial cavalry's battle steeds had already come barging over. His squad of vanguards was promptly slammed back, and the horses in the rear all fell butt first into the trench. The mounted crossbow had already been hoisted up, however, it still was not enough. Shenzhequan barked, "Shove again." The passage planks over the trench were all more or less broken. River water splashed, and the rain of fire from the top of the city wall was still falling. Hassan's assault charge had already fallen apart. In his retreat, he violently rolled off his horse, taking Shenzhequan along with him. Shenzhequan fell into the mud. Without even pausing to wipe his face, he rolled over first to draw out some distance between him and Hassan. He was filthy through and through, and there was no way to tell where he was bleeding. Drops of blood fused into the mud and water, masked under the surging beats of hooves. Hassan knew to seize his opportunity. In the few blows he had traded with Shenzhequan earlier, he had already seen through him. This man's physical strength had been exhausted to the point that he was not his match at all. He pounced, and took advantage of the splattering muddy water to immediately flash his way in front of Shenzhequan. Shenzhequan parried the blow with his blade and was knocked back half a step by the impact of Hassan's force. Before Hassan could stand firm, Shenzhequan protruded a foot and swept Hassan off his feet. Hassan braced himself against the ground with one hand and immediately sprang back. The pike dagger between his fingers twirled around with unusual dexterity. Shenzhequan dodged it, and Yang Shanshui and the pike dagger struck against each other in a collective crack. With a piece of quick thinking, Tan Taihu raised his hands and bellowed, "Release a fire attack to cover his lordship." Braving the blasts from the cannons, the garrison troops at the top of the city wall drew their bows. As expected, Hassan retreated a little. It was only when he got a clear look at the top of the city wall that he learned that he had fallen for it again. There was no more kerosene left at the top of the city wall. Before he could retract his gaze, he felt a sudden weight on his chest as Shenzhequan kicked him back. As Hassan fell backward, he grasped hold of Shenzhequan's ankle, dragging Shenzhequan to the ground as well. Mud splashed all over. The handkerchief loosened, and the 3 fingers that could still feel failed to hold on tight to Yang Shanshui, which fell over to one side. Shenzhequan coughed out blood. He attempted to rise to his feet, but failed. Hassan agilely straightened up. Seeing that Shenzhequan was about to grasp his blade, he dragged Shenzhequan by the ankle and hauled him backward. From where he was in the mud, Shenzhequan grabbed at empty air. He resolutely gave up on Yang Shanshui. With one hand, he pressed down on his waist where he was injured, and flipped to his feet, relying on the physical strength of his waist. These few moves were really going to be the death of him. Gasping hard for breath, Shenzhequan elbowed Hassan in the face hard. The G-clan boxing style was fierce and hard-hitting, and the force of it caused Hassan to let go of his hand. However, he reacted quickly. The pike dagger slipped from his right hand and landed into his left hand, which he thrust right at Shen Zequin's throat, catching him unaware. Unable to block with one arm, he swiftly clamped down on Hassan's left hand with both arms and leaned the upper half of his body slightly. The pike dagger stopped right within a hair's breadth of him. Blood spilled between Shen Zequin's teeth. With the metallic taste of blood in his mouth, he twisted over Hassan's left hand and raised his knee to slam it into Hassan's chest as Hassan was leaning over towards him. Hassan instantly fell to the ground. Shen Zequin turned his head aside to spit out the blood. When Hassan raised his head, he smashed a fist into Hassan's head, knocking it askew. Hassan turned his face away and grabbed hold of Shen Zequin's forearm with his bare hands. At the same time Shen Zequin retracted his strength, Hassan flipped over, bringing Shen Zequin falling down with him into the mud once again. Shen Zequin's right arm was dislocated. As he fell to the ground, he gripped the side of Hassan's collar and called out, "Tan Tai Hu!" Tan Tai Hu roared, "Release the arrows!" Sparks sprayed all around the mounted crossbow. At the very moment the long arrow sprang forth, it hurtled right towards Hassan with a trail of swift and fierce wind following in its wake. Hassan yanked Shen Zequin up and rolled backward to lunge right into the trench. The arrow of the mounted crossbow went crashing into the trench, stirring up a billow of waves. Shen Zequin gulped in a few mouthfuls of filthy water, which choked him until his head was swimming. Throughout it all, Hassan did not release his grip on him. Dragging Shen Zequin along, he climbed his way to the opposite side of the trench. "Your head." Hassan pulled out the scimitar by the side of his waist again. "I'm going to gift it to Xiao Qi yet." With his neck tilting up, Shen Zequin spat out the muddy sediment amidst his gasp for breath and let loose a laugh. His expressive eyes that were partially closed appeared particularly nefarious as he said, "The wind is here." Hassan scythed his scimitar over but Shen Zequin instantly raised a leg to stomp hard on Hassan's chest. In the very instant that he did so, he grabbed the dagger at the side of his leg with his left hand and caught Hassan's scimitar in its track. With the scimitar stuck, Hassan strained himself to inch backward. Shen Zequin had already landed on the ground. Snagging the scimitar from his dagger, Shen Zequin landed another blow right in Hassan's face when Hassan retreated back. Hassan tilted over and staggered. Imitating Shen Zequin's earlier action, he crouched and swept out a leg without warning. Shen Zequin did not fall. Hassan braced himself against the ground to get up. Right at this moment, a burst of what sounded like the wind being ripped once again erupted in the air. A sharp arrow followed in the wake of a burst of muffled thunder and, along with the torrential rainstorm, stabbed into the ground beside Hassan. The conqueror bowed, soaking in the rain. That was not muffled thunder from the sky, but thunderclaps on the ground. The heavy cavalry thundered as they stomped across the ground, even crashing away the rainwater as they charged like an overbearing, ferocious beast pouncing out of the dark night. Lang Tao Xuejin charged through the curtain of rain, and Xiao Qi Ye, awash in blood all over, came killing like a bolt of jet-black lightning from the horizon to the battlefield. The passage of heavy frost through the lands. The wolf was here. End chapter. Note, hour of Zhou is 1 to 3 a.m.